Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Peter Sebio, and I am on the marketing side here at Grasp Technologies. Today, we've got a really exciting topic for you all. So much about travel is all about telling good stories. And within our industry, it's really no different. Today, we are going to get into the metrics and analytics that really matter when it comes to crafting a full and accurate story about your travel program. Before we get started, I'd like to kind of just go through a few housekeeping items. We are always welcome to take questions. We love it when you guys get get participating in this whole process. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate. You can go ahead and type them right into the questions box, and we will make sure to get to them at the end of the presentation. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce who I have alongside with me. We have Mike Duffy, Head of Product and Innovation here at Grasp, and Tina Quattlebaum, Senior Director of Strategic Partnerships at Grasp.
Thanks so much, Peter.
Yeah. Hi, everyone.
And thanks for everyone for joining. Just let's kind of get started looking at some the KPIs. And Tina, I know you and I talked a bit on the topic of metrics in corporate travel. What's relevant, what's not, what corporate T&E spend KPIs would look like. Does booking 14 days in advance, is that still relevant in today's landscape? Could you talk a little bit on that, and would there be any other KPIs?
Sure, thanks, Mike. So I think certainly the traditional metrics are still important. They operationally tell us what's happening. The 14-day advance purchase, the online booking adoption, all of those are certainly still relevant. But I think it's good to challenge everyone to think a little bit differently. The travel landscape is evolving, as you mentioned, and I think framing it in the same way we would manage our lives, right? We think about budget, we think about behavior, and we think about how we can build for the future. So it's the same with data. As the landscape is evolving, so is data and what the story can tell us. We can think about forecasting, we can think about trending, we can think about analysis, we can think how we can influence that behavior, the traveler's behavior, and then we can think about forecasting and building the best program possible.
Perfect. And when we look at the specific metrics, can you talk more on the different metrics and how they matter? Both, I'll use the term conventional KPIs, and then those that would be like newer or non-conventional, like traveler well-being and sustainability.
Yeah, sure. So thinking about the 14-day advance purchase, outside of the U.S., that's not as important. In the U.S., traditionally, it was to save money. It was to really get the best fare and really respond to the dynamic pieces of the way fares are priced. Now it's more coming out of the pandemic. There's less flights. The flights are getting disrupted a lot. There's a lot of cancellations. So it's more about managing that and the disruption, ensuring that travelers have the best choice, compliance to your preferred suppliers. I think in the traditional model with the 14-day advance purchase, people were really focused on getting the best fare, and they weren't always choosing the preferred suppliers and being compliant to policy. They were just worried that they booked in advance and they took the cheapest fare. So as an example, as a corporate buyer, we did some city pair analysis. We looked at, was there really a benefit to booking 14 days in advance? Where was that sweet spot? And it's also balancing the traveler's behavior. They're having to balance their business considerations. They're having to balance their personal requirements. And so I would encourage everyone to really look at, your top city pairs, look at the dynamic pricing, look at how it's priced 7 days, 14 days, 2 days, 5 days, and then try to focus on how you can influence the behavior of your travelers, make them more aware of the compliance in the preferred suppliers, make them aware of the perks that you may have negotiated on behalf of those preferred suppliers. What type of amenities? Do they get lounge access? Do they get special seat assignments? And really get them to engage in the benefits of the program and the benefits of those preferred suppliers and those preferred contracts.
Mhm.
And as an example on that, we were able to, in one of my situations, we were able to influence and we were able to achieve some additional cost savings. We were able to increase our compliance to hotel attachments. So we were in the 30% range. We were able to get up towards 60% in just educating people on what planning in advance was and what capabilities that it provided. So it gave them the ability to highlight those preferred suppliers, highlight what the company wanted them to do, what amenities were available if they booked those preferred suppliers. They weren't so focused just on cost savings, and the traditional metrics traditionally focused on just getting the best fare and booking 14 days in advance. And the airlines, have also responded. They're able to dynamically manage that pricing much better than they used to, and 14 days may not be the sweet spot depending on your city pairs.
Mhm.
Just to kind of emphasize all this, just from speaking with the various teams, internal team, especially here at Grasp, and with various clients, sustainability has been a hot topic for at least the last several years. And companies are all at different stages in their ESG compliance journey, but all are looking to have at least a foundation of information to start with. Travel well-being metrics are more recent and will probably evolve as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Different companies have different, to your point, Peter, they're at different places in their journey. Some are very sophisticated. They have an ESG program that corporate travel, it's important to align with on what those goals are. They may have a 2025 goal, they may have a 2040 goal. Really getting engaged and understanding what those overarching goals are around sustainability, diversity, and inclusion, because it's usually part of a bigger program, especially for the larger companies. Some are in that, they're just starting to crawl and they haven't started walking yet. So it's the basic reporting on, what is our footprint? How do we influence that footprint? What are some of the patterns that we're seeing out of that footprint? An example of that would be one-day trips. Really taking a look at those one-day trips. Are they necessary? Giving, the agency community can really help be that consultative arm and say, hey, X% of your trips are one-day trips. Is there an opportunity to manage those differently? Is the need to travel really there for just a one-day trip? And what is the ROI on that trip? And that, and that messaging can combine with the sustainability. We can save the world a little bit by not traveling and not engaging in that activity, but we can also reduce costs for the company.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, valid point. And I see that. I agree with both of you there. It seems like there has been like a lot of the ESG initiatives starting off during the pandemic, and that's kind of maybe not plateaued, but I guess more companies are getting in and they're trying to get started on having some sort of position on ESG. And so Tina, just as your time as a corporate buyer, thinking of the TMC, what were you looking for from your TMC? How to help your goals and initiatives, and how did data play a role?
Yeah, I think data is the oil, right? It's what frames the story, and it's the agencies have the ability, to really consult and play that type of role with their contacts at the corporation. So really thinking about how they're engaging with the stakeholders, what are the services they are offering, measuring satisfaction, playing that consultative role, taking a look at the city pairs, looking at the preferred compliance, measuring that type of thing. And I guess the other thing, really just listening and understanding what the overarching client goals are. Are they in acquisition mode? Are they in cost control mode? Are they focused on ESG? Are they focused on, safety and security? And I think balancing that service delivery with that compliance to preferred policy, that also playing that role of being dynamic, being able to respond to, hey, we're seeing these trends. Is there the appetite to change or modify the corporate travel policy? And here's what we're seeing our other clients do. Really playing that engaging role and providing a little bit more of a 360 view of travel versus just, hey, here's operationally what we're doing. Here's how many tickets we issued. Here's your average ticket price. Here's your 14-day advance purchase. Here's your online booking. Really playing that, providing that messaging of why those things are important, because quite honestly, depending on the stakeholder, those things aren't important. And so I was really looking for the agency to be a true partner, and we would do our part to engage as well, you know, and I think it's important to nourish those relationships and engage and, you know, push your clients a little bit, help us understand what your company needs, help us understand what initiatives you have, what's your long-term, you know, goals and products and things like that. So really just that constant two-way communication.
Mm-hmm. And I know you mentioned that, you know, it sort of depends on, you know, the stakeholder, and I think that's very true. And I think maybe we, you know, it might be helpful just to kind of outline who the stakeholders are. And when I look at it, and there's sort of, you know, different lenses you can look at, you know, all the stakeholders involved, but I kind of picture it in my head. I'm looking at this sort of almost thing, the story kind of rolling up. You know, you got your procurement, your finance, accounting, HR, and they all have different perspectives of what they're looking for. You know, that could be, you know, more cost savings, it could be it could be more duty of care, etc. And that rolls up, you know, to the corporate travel manager at the organization, and then to the TMC. So they all kind of have, you know, different interests, and yeah. And so I just, you know, wanted to put something here, just how I was visualizing. That's just one person's take. But, you know, if we look at the individuals in the ecosystem, there's a lot. There's a lot of individuals, a lot of departments. And, you know, with your background now, how does a travel manager, you know, juggle all that? How does data help, you know, determine which stakeholders need to be involved, and how do you tell that story?
Yeah, I think, you know, it's tough sometimes, and I think it depends sometimes where travel fits in the organization. You know, for a lot of companies, it goes into procurement. Some it goes into finance, some it goes into HR. So I think, you know, understanding, you know, where you fit and what is your part of that story in how you report into that vertical within your company. I think also though it's knowing your audience. So, you know, the procurement person is going to be pretty focused on you know, the sourcing, the contract compliance, that type of thing. The finance department's maybe going to be more detail oriented, wanting that analysis, wanting that forecast, wanting those trends, those types of things. And you know, I think about it, you know, again, to use the family analogy, you know, how I would explain something to a 3-year-old versus the 15-year-old. Sometimes the story is the same, but the way that you explain it has to be different. And you have to modify and be able to be dynamic in your approach and really think about your, not only the individual audience, but the overarching goal that the department has.
That's an interesting comparison. You know, you know, without, I guess, which of these departments would be the 3-year-old, I guess?
I'm gonna plead the fifth on that, but you know, look, I think they each have different challenges. You know, I think the procurement mindset is very sourcing oriented. Again, contract compliance, cost savings, cost management, cost mitigation. And you know, they're looking at it from the lens of how they source and do other sourcing, you know, how they buy boxes, how they buy pencils, how they buy paper. And travel is so much different because there's what the traveler intends to do when he or she makes their plans to travel. There's what actually occurs on the trip, disruptions, changes, cancellations. I have to stay later. Now I have to go to a different city. I have to maybe leave my vacation early to attend this important meeting. And then how they eventually, you know, file their expense report and account for the finance piece of it, the financial piece of it, and what that return of investment was on that trip. So, you know, each one of those people look at it differently. The safety and security, those people are looking at it around response to crisis. Yeah, actively managing and anticipating what a crisis might be. And it could be everything from geopolitical to, hey, Taylor Swift's going to be in town in Paris, and maybe we should, help consult with people not to travel to Paris on that during that time. Whatever it might be, it can be the little things, or it can be the crisis, management, the bomb that's gone off, or the volcano that's disrupted, those types of things. The HR component, they're going to be looking at traveler satisfaction, traveler wellness, even a little bit the budget owner. The budget owner wants a happy team. They want a happy team. They want to know that their team is engaged in travel, putting the company's best foot forward, selling that product, selling that service that the company represents, and they want their teams to be engaged, happy, not having to leave on a weekend if that's preventable, not having to come home late on a Friday night, not missing, their son or daughter's event, that type of thing. And so you can shift some of that lens as a travel manager, and on the agency side, play that consultative role. Hey, we see that a lot of your travelers are having to leave on a Sunday. Here's the trends that we're seeing. Here's why they're traveling. They're traveling internationally. Are they traveling multiple times a year? And I think the other thing to think about there is there's, usually 3 to 4 personas in a company. There's the occasional traveler, 1 to 3 times. They're going to a conference. They're probably going to follow policy, and they're probably going to do everything that they, are supposed to do. Then there's that 3 to 6 or 7 time a year traveler. They may want to stay over the weekend. They may need more consulting around policy and process. And then you have the road warriors, that usually know what they want to do. And maybe there's some other opportunities to look at what they're doing differently. Are there amenities that can be provided to them as part of your sourcing contract to make their life easier? So just really looking at it from a different lens of just operational execution, I think. That's certainly important, and that's what keeps the lights on. And it's the way we respond to those events, and we present that data. But I think it's framing the story and really providing that forward-thinking perspective. How do we be proactive? How do we respond dynamically to adjustments needed in policy, in travel patterns, that type of thing? And then how do we measure success? And how do we know that that measurement is successful? There's a benchmarking element that I think the agencies can play. What are other clients doing? And each client is different and each client is unique, but there's some similarities that, the data can provide direction and guidance and consultative, input on to really make the programs more successful.
And yeah, go ahead, Peter.
Speaking of Taylor Swift and rising importance of sustainable flying practices, but all this, it really does speak to the importance of having a full and true picture, because you're right. Each of these departments, we're not saying that what metric matters to procurement doesn't matter as much as the metric that applies to that matters to finance and accounting or to legal. It's just that it's different. It's different, and you speak to each of those metrics in a specific kind of way, but it's important to have all those metrics in there as a full picture to tell a good story, to tell an accurate story.
Yeah, and I think it's important too to not forget about the traveler, right? The traveler is contributing to the success or the failure of your program, and so, or the success of the failure, as an agency and the client. And many of them are booking online. Most companies now book at least 50-60% online, and many times they don't even know there's a travel agency that sits behind that online booking tool. So, really providing that education, that awareness. Hey, there is an agency that can, help you if you get into a bind on your trip, and really looking at how the traveler, instead of taking that carrot approach, really looking at how the traveler can help contribute to the success of the program. You want them to engage. You want them to use your preferred suppliers. You want to receive input on how that servicing works, whether it's the online booking tool or whether it's the interaction with the agency one-on-one, when there is a plan. We all like to do and be very self-sufficient now, but when we need help, we need help. And it's really nice to have that response from, the agency partners when there is a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Or that proactive approach from the agencies. I think that's just as important. I think we sometimes tend, even in our, personally, we tend to react versus think about how we can proactively present solutions. And really, again, that goes back to listening to your clients and really understanding what their problems are. Are they managing cost? Are they sustainability? What are the priorities? What are the initiatives? Is it payment? Is it process? Is it efficiency? What are the key focus opportunities in going back and forth? And then going a step further and saying, hey, have you thought about this? This is something we're measuring with another client. Would that be successful, or would that, work in your environment? And data tells that. It's the oil that, data tells the story, good or bad, or somewhere in the middle, and it provides the insights. It provides the analysis, and the agency partners and the travel manager can provide the insights and the consultative role.
Yeah. And I just looked at this infographic just because I think this kind of sort of encapsulates what you've just said, and that, having the multiple data sets, and then that will lead to the insights, and then you have the story around that. And it can be different from one perspective to another. What is the focus really, and what's the audience looking for?
Absolutely. And, measuring that success, as I mentioned with the 14-day, we took the shift off measuring that 14-day advance, and we still did that, but we also took the shift off, hey, book 14 days in advance, not to save money necessarily, but here's the benefits of booking 14 days in advance. You'll get your better seat assignment. You'll get the preferred hotel that you want. And by the way, did you know this is our preferred hotel in that city? Evaluate the options there. And again, making the messaging around some of those analytics different. Not so cost focused or so hammer focused, but more, this is the value to you as a traveler, and this is what it's helping support from a company wise, the support of our preferred contracts, things like that. So just reframing it a little bit. It's similar to, again, using the 3-year-old or the 15-year-old or the 16-year-old probably is a better. If I take away the keys of the car, they're going to be motivated differently than if I say, hey, here's some things that we can do, and I can think about lightening up your curfew, or you can earn some gas money here, or whatever. It's that carrot approach versus that hammer approach.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a really great comparison, because I think that is, you're looking at the underlying motivations of the individuals, and how do you use that to change behavior?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And just, in terms of data, just, it plays a big role into what's happening in the case of insights, and payments can also have an impact on as well. If you look at, credit cards, for instance, they're essentially data flowing from one system to another, and how's the booking just being made, what payments being applied, and it can really impact the travelers and the corporations. And I think I've heard, Tina, you've mentioned a few times, there's sometimes hesitation, on the corporate side, on just around virtual payments a little bit. Can you tell me a little bit on that?
Yeah, sure. So, coming post-pandemic, there was a lot of emphasis on, artificial intelligence and robotics and chat and things like that. And those are continuing to evolve. And there's, another layer of that happening. On the payment side, there's all the things happening, virtual payment, AP automation for B2B and for your, low value transactions. And blockchain, and there's a lot of stuff happening in it. And it's a little more, I think, intimidating, right? Because it involves a lot of different departments. It involves, the HR component to think about how do we need to pay and secure travel. More companies are outsourcing resources. They're not bringing people on as employees. So how do we deliver value for travel there, and how do we secure travel for them? You have to integrate it into your AP process. You have to integrate it into, how it's into the systems on how you manage it, how you reconcile it, how you become efficient in the process of it, how you train your people that are using. If you jump from a central bill card to a virtual payment card, what are the dynamics around training and change management? So I think it's just a little overwhelming, and I think it's also how to build that business case for it in companies that is a little bit challenging, because a lot of times people do what they did yesterday because it's easy and because they know it and they know how to do it. And I think particularly with payment, we, in the meetings and events side of things, you had people that shared central bill numbers. Same way really with candidate travel, we had people that shared, their central bill accounts. So it would, maybe muddy it up between business units, muddy it up with product lines, etc. So from a reporting perspective, things would get mixed up. From an allocation perspective, it would be difficult to reconcile and then allocate it back to the appropriate budget owner. So it just is overwhelming for a lot of people, I think. And then
Yeah,
just understanding the logistics of how it works. What does it mean for the end user? What does it mean for the traveler when he or she checks into that hotel? They don't know, and they're not comfortable, with a non-piece of plastic in their hand always.
yeah, and I think that's it. I think it's around, being comfortable with the status quo, and the pains that, come with that. I mean, so, with central bill cards, there could be, compromised cards, mystery charges, difficulty reconciling, and essentially, additional time and cost, per booking. Um, and so, before, diving into, more on the virtual cards, if you could talk a little bit on some of the challenges with the traditional payments, like the central bill cards.
Yeah, so I think the biggest challenge is always the reconciliation. It's a nightmare to reconcile, central bill cards traditionally, depending on how you're using them. If you have multiple ones, if you have, a one owner central bill card or central bill account, or if you have multiple people using that central bill account, you get into, refunds, changes, cancellations, how it looks when it comes through. If it's really close to the billing cycle, the reconciliation becomes, very, very difficult, depending on how you're engaging with accounts payable and then how that central bill is paid. It may be tied into paying it, in a certain amount of time to ensure that you get your agreement with your corporate card provider to make sure that you meet those guidelines and incentives if there are some. So it's the reconciliation that's the biggest piece of it. I think the other piece that's is always, always, always difficult is, especially in the hotel space, when you're trying to arrange for a candidate or a non-employee, any type of non-employee really, travel to check in for a hotel or buy an airline ticket. It's, you don't want them to have to use their personal card. So now you're, again, having to maybe make a picture of the front and back of the card. You're sending it traditional fax sometimes, maybe over email, which exposes the safety and security of that card number. With two-way authentication now, some things are being asked when those central bill cards are used that are not known by the user that, is sharing the card number. It could be the address, it could be the phone number, it could be the CVV, and that type of information is not always shared. So then they run into a problem there. The same thing happens when they check in at a hotel, using the hotel as an example. It hasn't gone through, or all the all the breadcrumbs haven't been attached so that when the traveler checks in, they still don't have a problem. So I think virtual pay has the opportunity to solve a lot of that. I think it's all very important though that you engage the right people internally before you think about it to make sure that your configuration in your online booking tool is set up correctly. You have to engage your IT department from a safety security. Think about your cross-border expenses. How many expenses do you have, that require a cross-border? Think about first and foremost, think about the traveler experience. And then on the reconciliation side, bring the right people in very early in on the conversation. Your card holder, first and foremost, your card program, who manages your card program, first and foremost, because how you're set up makes a difference in how it works. We were utilizing it in a couple of ways. We were utilizing it for our candidates. We were using it for some of our non-colleague travel from a project perspective. And we were also using it in a B2B way, at a larger scale. So it doesn't come without challenges, but if you engage the right stakeholders early on, like every implementation, you're going to run into hills and valleys, but at the end, you're going to get the final result. And we were able to achieve increased rebates because of the way that we paid more efficiently. We were able to reconcile to budget more effectively, and we were able to enhance some of the experience.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that sounds like a lot of benefits there. And thinking of the use cases that you've talked about, a few of them already, like if it's meetings and events, crew travel, candidate travel, which you mentioned, non-employee, like the contractor students, they're great examples, where virtual credit card can be provisioned to those. But essentially the reasons are the same for all travelers. There's actual budget controls on the cards. It can be narrowed to a very dollar amount, can't be overspent. Lifetime of the card is a very narrow window, and it can be only used for certain merchants like a hotel. So you're never going to see an Amazon charge, for instance. And then the other benefits, and you also mentioned the reconciliation. It's fully automated, so often that task could be quite time consuming for a central bill card. And so, what are some considerations one would ask, when kind of adopting virtual cards? And so thinking about, training, is there any change to the agents? If so, what does that look like? Does your accounting department need any specific output of the reconciled transactions? Like, do they feed into another system? Cross-border, you also mentioned that one, Tina, that, do you have payments issued in different currencies? Is that configured in your OBT? Non-employee travel, is that even enabled in your OBT? And then acceptance, are there any issues today, for instance, with the hotels you booked today, are they accepting a card not present transaction? And just thinking of, rather than hypothetical examples, you'll always go. I like Disney as an example. We often talk about the qualitative benefits like fraud prevention, REC policy, and through the payment channel, and those are quite important. And fraud prevention, for instance, it may seem like it's more solving a problem, perhaps for the merchant, because the merchants would have to cover the cost. But it's also important to the traveler as well. So, imagine going on a trip and you get to the hotel front desk and they're saying, the card and file is locked due to fraudulent transactions. What do you do? So it does impact, everyone that's involved in that booking flow. And I love Disney because it is very quantitative ROI. They've calculated a $2.8 million savings through a combination of reduction of transaction fees and reduced labor on the reconciliation time that they experienced. And so for the transaction fees, a lot of it was regarding non-employee bookings, and they moved from manually applying payment for those bookings to using a virtual credit card in their online booking tool. And because of that, it had reduced transaction fees, employee costs, because it was fully online. terms of reconciliation, the rec went from the manual process to a fully automated one, which included a lot of the enriched data, unique identifiers that they were applying as well. So, cost center, project numbers, business units. And so that's a very real and tangible ROI. And I think, expanding, our focus, just not only, on payment, but around traditional metrics, it not only optimizes, the costs, but it enhances the overall value of the travel program. And this, holistic approach kind of will lead to, better cost reductions, ESG impact, satisfied travelers, compliance, and just like an overall more positive impact.
Absolutely, Mike, and especially things like what Disney was using it for. Very often, pre-virtual pay, it's hard to really report on what that activity is, because oftentimes maybe a manager is using his or her card for that non-employee. Maybe it's getting, on the central bill card that marketing uses, and it's really for a sales travel or a sales meeting of some kind or a sales project of some kind. Usually projects can be, a short-term project or a long-term project. And so how to manage those costs and just having the visibility into that data. And then that also feeds into the opportunities that it might provide, the increased opportunity for sourcing opportunities. The increased opportunity for other efficiencies, whether it's, to your point about reducing costs from an HR, the amount of people that it takes to process that. There's a very real and measurable, cash on hand and the way that cash management is done with your corporate card providers. That's very quantifiable. You're increasing your compliance to that payment. You're controlling that payment when you pay that corporate card. And many times with, the non-traditional way, or the more traditional way rather, that didn't happen. It was expensed on somebody's expense report. So you're able to control things and pull levers that you previously weren't able to pull. And I think the most important thing the lessons that I've learned in that, and I've only been with a couple of companies that we piloted it and we did, implement in a very controlled environment. So it wasn't rolled out globally, but it's really important to engage with your stakeholders and really understand the process. And I would include the agency personnel, the very operational people that what they do today for direct bills, what they do today for handling that type of travel, because there's nuances. Crew travels might have special things that are put into the GDS or into the agentware, whatever system that the travel agency is using, for their agents, and the people actually hands on the keyboard, operationally executing that travel, they're important to engage, because I guarantee you there are things you're not going to think about. Then on the internal side, thinking about your online booking configuration, you brought it up a minute ago, is even guest booking allowed? How is the setup structured? Do you have unique profiles for each of your user groups? The payment side, how it integrates, how that reconciliation integrates into the appropriate tools from a company perspective. On the corporate card side, at the very beginning, just as important as the agents that have their hands on the keyboard, on the corporate card side, what is the hierarchy that you've built out? We at Pfizer, using Pfizer as an example, we had lodge cards, we had Euro cards, we had different currency type cards, we had, all different kinds of setups in our corporate hierarchy. And that impacts how things are paid and that experience, even on the virtual pay side. So it's just important to bring in those stakeholders early, and it's achievable, but it could be a marathon or it could be a sprint, depending on what you focus on first. The candidate travel is always one that everybody understands, but there may be you get into problems where the HR department, that may not be their focus to make that more efficient. You have to sell that you have to show that ROI. Here's how it can be a better experience for what they're focused on is that candidate, bringing that candidate on board, having a good experience interviewing for the company, having a good travel experience. So how do you sell that value of that virtual payment? What's in it for them?
Absolutely. I kind of wanted to expand a little bit on Mike, your first point. Expanding our focus beyond just traditional metrics. That can have that impact can be on a lot of great things, and I think the three main areas are firstly identifying spending patterns. You can uncover trends in traveler spending behavior post-booking, which can inform more dynamic pricing strategies. Enhancing fraud detection, that's a big deal, a really big deal, especially nowadays. With analytics can quickly flag unusual transactions, increasing security for both agency and the traveler. And lastly, optimizing cash flow management. Immediate insights into payment statuses allow for better financial planning and resource allocation.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Mike.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, Peter, all of those are good points. And I think, the two-way authentication, even three-way in some places in Europe is becoming more and more of a thing. And the sharing of cards, that's going to become more and more of a problem. And in some cases, some corporate card providers are going to move away from the central bill product a little bit more and go with, that virtual mobile type payment platform. So I think, the messaging on all of this is just embrace the technology, embrace the evolution. We've all been down these paths before. When online booking came on board, everybody, was intimidated by that. And how are we going to service it? How are we going to do? How are we going to respond to that ever-changing and that dynamic environment? Now travelers are going to make decisions, and we're not going to be consultative. And we survived that. And so I think it's just embracing it. Tailoring for the agency community out there, tailoring those solutions to be unique to your clients, but also look at the overarching trends and things that you're seeing from the data of all your clients, being proactive and being able to dynamically respond and try to think about the entire ecosystem and never forgetting about the user, the traveler, because that is what will set you apart, both as a travel manager and as a TMC. The experience that the traveler has and what that data is telling you about the traveler and how you can influence his or her behavior, how you can predict his or her behavior, how you can negotiate, how you can save money, how you can avoid the cost, all of those things. And that data, the data can tell you that. It's just looking at it and really framing it differently in your minds and go away from that operational execution. While that's really important, I'm an ops girl at heart, so super important. And it's like I always refer to it as electricity. It's not important until you don't have it. So ops is really, really important, but you can measure the success of ops in other ways. How's your satisfaction? And a happy traveler will be a compliant traveler.
Absolutely, yeah. We've given a lot of time for everyone to plug in questions, so I'm going to go ahead and dive in there, see what we got. Just letting everyone know, if you got any questions now, feel free to plug them into the box. So I have 3 separate questions asking if I'll be sending out a recording of this. So I just want to address that real quickly. Yes, tomorrow early morning I'll be sending everyone a link that will allow them to not only watch this current presentation, but also download the PowerPoint that we are using. Let's see, next question we have. Are there any specific platforms that Grasp Analytics is optimized for, or is it platform agnostic?
I'll take that one. It's a bit of it depends. So some platforms are very turnkey. You just connect and everything just works. Some others require a little bit more TLC, and that's more or less not because of the individual platforms, but sometimes it requires further data mapping. The corporate policies. It really comes down to the client's needs and to configure basically rather than customize. So it's not really a development effort. It's just more or less taking the time to make sure that the configuration is going to be what the client's looking for.
Yeah, and
Okay.
I think I just add to that too, thinking about how you want to report on the data. So do you want to report, and what elements you need to do that to be successful? Do you want to report on it, regionally, by cost center, by business unit, whatever's appropriate for your client or your customer, thinking about it that way, because those are the elements that need to be mapped.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. And sort of another similar question. What about virtual credit cards and their connectivity?
Yeah, that one is very much a configuration. But once configured, it can be even a touchless workflow. So depending on what the client's looking for. So if they want maybe they want agents to click a couple buttons and get a virtual card. So that would require a little bit connectivity into the agent's current tools. Or is it just pushing it to the online booking tool and down to the GDS profile, in which case that is fully touchless, and some travelers and agents don't even know that they have a virtual card. They're just getting a card in a credit card field and everything just works. So it really depends on sort of what the client is looking to achieve and how they currently have their existing workflow as well.
Thanks, Mike. Last question we have here. This is an interesting one. How can we balance cost savings with sustainability and well-being?
Yeah, so that's a tough one because sustainable doesn't always mean cheap or cost savings. And, and there's also other considerations for sustainability using electric cars, for example. Many people haven't driven an electric car, and that the way that you drive an electric car is different. The way that you recharge it is different. Are there wherever you're traveling to, thinking about that? So it is a tough one. I think the way that you balance it, though, is really just understanding what your company's goals are and what is part of the bigger picture. And is it really focused on, one example of it would be, in the meeting space, you can eliminate a lot of paper material that would save a lot of money for your company. So, paraphernalia, you can reuse your digital setups at meetings and events. You can do a lot of things around that can demonstrate savings and can also respond to the ability to be better, for the environment. I mean, at one of the use cases we went to a fully mobile platform for some of our meeting and events. So long ago, they shipped boxes of paper and materials, and we did the same thing internally with our training. We did a center of excellence, and we used to send a lot of things out. We digitized it, and that's where people went. It was up to date quicker. It was relevant. It was able to be manipulated, pretty quickly, and people responded really positively to it, and it did provide savings. So it depends on, I think, each element of it, but there's definitely some savings that you can quantify with it.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Thanks, Tina.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a great question because it also kind of actually ties into a next webinar we have. In the middle of November, we'll be doing a webinar specifically on that topic, on sustainability, well-being, and your sort of ESG goals and initiatives. And Mike will have Scott Gillespie with us, correct?
That's correct. He's going to be a guest speaker for us on that topic as well.
Awesome. Yeah. So everyone here, you guys will be getting some material on that webinar very soon. So keep an eye out for that.
I look forward to everybody's participation.
Yeah, definitely. And with that said, I think we're all good. Doesn't look like we have any other questions. yeah, I'll go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you, Tina and Mike, for doing this, and thank you everyone for for participating and listening in. Thank you so much.
Great.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Peter, and thanks everyone for joining.
Have
Have a
good
great
day.
day, guys. Bye.